The rain had been falling since dawn, the kind that soaked through jackets and moods alike, when Adam first noticed the girl at the bus stop, sitting so still she seemed carved out of the gray morning itself, and even though he was late again, late for his shift at the warehouse, late for the call he promised his son, late for a life that never waited, his feet slowed without his permission, because something about the way she held herself felt wrong, too careful, too quiet for a child in a city that never stopped moving. She couldn't have been older than 10, maybe 11 at most, her thin sweater several sizes too big, sleeves pulled over her hands as if she were trying to disappear inside it, and beside her on the wet concrete rested a white cane with chipped paint and a cracked handle, angled just enough to tell anyone who bothered to look that she was blind, though no one did, because people hurried past with umbrellas tilted forward and eyes fixed on their own destinations. Stepping around her as if she were part of the street furniture, Adam stood there longer than he meant to, watching buses hiss to a stop and pull away, watching the girl's head turn slightly each time one arrived, not toward the doors but toward the sound, counting silently, lips moving just a little, and that small detail tightened something in his chest, a familiar ache he'd learned to live with since his wife died and left him to raise their son alone, because he recognized that look of listening carefully to a world that didn't listen back. Finally he stepped closer and spoke, keeping his voice low and steady the way he did with frightened animals or with his son on nights when grief crept in unannounced, and when he said hello the girl turned toward him instantly, a polite smile appearing as if she'd practiced it many times, as if smiling were armor, and she told him her name was Lily, her voice soft but sure, and said she was waiting for her aunt, who had gone to get something and would be right back. Adam glanced around, noticing the soaked bench, the empty trash can, the flickering streetlight that buzzed like an insect, and something about the way she said, "right back," made his stomach sink, because it sounded memorized rather than believed, so he asked how long she'd been waiting and she hesitated just long enough to be honest before whispering, "Since the morning." And that was when the worry sharpened into anger, because morning had been hours ago and no child, blind or not, should have been left alone this long. He offered to buy her something warm to eat, and she thanked him with a gratitude that felt far too heavy for someone her age, telling him as they walked carefully to the corner shop that she liked to count the buses because each engine sounded different and that sometimes she pretended they were animals passing by, and Adam found himself smiling despite the knot in his chest, because her imagination reminded him of his son Max, who used to turn the hum of the refrigerator into a sleeping dragon before the world taught him to be quieter. When Adam tried calling the number Lily recited from memory, it rang once and disconnected, and when he tried again it went straight to voicemail without a name, just a hollow beep that echoed his growing dread. And as the rain grew heavier and the sky darkened far too early, Adam realized that no one was coming, that this small, blind girl had been left here deliberately or carelessly. And either possibility made his hands shake, because he knew too well how thin the line was between being overlooked and being lost entirely. He thought of Max waiting for him, thought of the rules he'd built to survive: don't get involved, don't complicate things, just keep moving. But as he looked at Lily sitting there patiently with her sandwich, counting the seconds by the drip of water from the shelter roof, he understood that walking away would be a kind of cruelty he could never explain to his son or to himself, and in that moment, standing in the cold rain beside a forgotten bus stop, Adam made a decision that would pull at every fragile thread of his already strained life, though he didn't yet know just how deep the truth behind Lily's silence would cut. Part 2. Adam took Lily home that night, calling his neighbor to pick up Max and explaining as best he could while Lily sat quietly beside him in the car, hands folded, absorbing the unfamiliar sounds of the engine and the wipers with calm curiosity, and when they reached his small apartment she moved slowly but confidently, counting her steps, memorizing the space as if this were not the first time she'd had to adapt quickly, and Max, when he arrived, stared at her at first with the blunt honesty of a child before softening into a gentleness that made Adam's throat tighten, because he saw his son offering Lily his favorite blanket without being asked, explaining the room in careful detail, and that night, as rain tapped against the windows, Adam lay awake listening to the two children breathe in the dark and wondered what kind of world left a blind girl at a bus stop and then slept soundly. The next morning he called social services expecting delays and indifference, but what he uncovered instead left him stunned, because Lily hadn't just been abandoned for a day, she'd been reported missing 3 weeks earlier, her case buried under paperwork and misfiled addresses, and the woman Lily called her aunt had been collecting disability checks and donations in her name while quietly planning to disappear, treating Lily less like a child and more like a source of income. And when Adam read the medical reports his hands trembled, because Lily's blindness wasn't something she'd been born with as she believed, but the result of untreated infections and repeated neglect, a slow theft of sight that could have been prevented if someone had cared enough to act. He looked at Lily sitting at his kitchen table, carefully helping Max with his homework by listening and asking questions, and something inside him broke open, because he realized that Lily hadn't survived because someone protected her but because she'd learned to protect herself, to wait quietly, to smile politely, to trust. Promises that never came true. Days turned into weeks as the system moved slowly, and in that time Adam found his life rearranging itself around Lily's presence in ways both exhausting and healing, because she laughed more now, a sound that filled the apartment like sunlight, and Max learned to describe colors and shapes out loud, rediscovering the joy of noticing things, and Adam learned how fierce love could be when it arrived unexpectedly, demanding space in a heart already crowded with loss. When the authorities finally placed Lily into protective care, she hugged Adam tightly, her small arms strong with certainty, and said, "I knew you were kind because you didn't walk past me," and that sentence followed him long after the door closed behind her, echoing in his mind during long shifts and quiet dinners. Months later a letter arrived, informing him that Lily had been placed with a foster family committed to her treatment and education, and that doctors believed her sight might partially return with care, and Adam sat at the kitchen table holding the letter while Max chattered beside him, tears blurring his vision as he understood the final, most shocking truth of all, that the world could be unimaginably cruel, yes, but it could also change in a single moment when someone chose to stop, to see, and to act, and that sometimes saving a stranger didn't just change their life, it quietly, irrevocably saved your own.